Yo guys, what is good? Welcome back on the Uncle Sharma channel. Big Champions League night. So obviously we need to do a big Champions League preview. And we have the opponents or experts of the opponent team with us today, joining us from the Long Futebol podcast. I gave it a little Portuguese twist there. We've got Barney and Albert joining me. And thank you, Barney and Albert, for joining me and give the people a little intro to who you guys are.
Yeah, thanks, mate. It's a pleasure to be here. Here to represent Porto tonight. There's no enemies here, though. We're all mates, of course. But looking forward to a great game. We're really excited. It's a big tie for Porto, and so we're really excited about this doubleheader. It's going to be great. Myself and Barney do a podcast called the Long Ball Futebol podcast. It's all about Portuguese football, the Primeira Liga. So yeah, every week we're discussing Porto, we're discussing Benfica, Sporting, but also loads of smaller other little teams in the league as well. Those hidden gems. There's so many good young players and managers on the brink of making it. So it's great to be here to talk about Portuguese football and of course Champions League as well.
Yeah. Any words, Barney, from you?
Oh man, I mean, I'm just excited to talk Champions League football. I think that's, we do our podcast focusing on the Premier League mainly in Portugal, but when we get an opportunity to discuss the Champions League and the sort of the history that Portuguese clubs have had in that competition, it's a real pleasure because there's been some big results in the past and in the recent past as well. So yeah, I'm eager to get stuck in and get into it.
Yeah, definitely. No, as you said, big tie. There's some history in there as well, and there's some parallels that we're going to talk about as well. But before we get into, let me just give a shout out to there's 35 people in the house right now. So let me just give a quick shout out to the people. We've got Mighty Mao. Definitely, we could be using the money into going forward from the Champions League. That extra 10-20 million always helps. The real Martinez will show up. Kuro Black, hopefully no for LAUTARO, Ashraf, Christian Potato. Marcello, thank you everyone that is joining. Appreciate you all. Matthias says most important game for the rest of the season. I agree. For Inter, this is, you guys might know it's Serie A. Inter definitely not winning the title now. It's pretty much top four, trying to secure top four. So this is really, our season is riding on this UCL game. So definitely all eyes, all focus for Inter fans. This is our biggest game of the season for now, for sure. Eduardo in house as well. Nick's Knox. It would be amazing to make the quarterfinals. Can't have our cousins make it and us not. Yeah, exactly. Milan on the other side are also looking like they might qualify because of how stinky Spurs are. So we, for sure, don't want to be left behind.
I think it's interesting to come in there, mate. I saw someone comment about the money and the financial situation of getting through to the next round for both clubs, and obviously Inter need the cash as much as Porto. But I don't know what the difference. You can tell me what the difference is, but in Portugal, it literally can make your next season getting through a round or two in the Champions League, like getting that windfall of cash and being able to spend a bit of money can make a huge difference in Portugal. But it seems like it's going to make a big difference to Inter as well if it was to happen.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's I think every team apart from Premier League clubs is a big deal.
100%.
Yeah. No, yeah, like for Inter, yeah, it's like, you make that extra, I think it's like 10 million for progressing the round, and then you make the money from the, obviously the stadium money, merch, whatever they're selling, and then obviously the progressing, because you obviously progress to the next round, so you'll make money from the next round as well. So it's massive on multiple levels, especially how both teams, yeah, as you said, financially need it. So very, very important. We don't want to be accountants like as football fans, but at the moment, I don't know, you guys, in the summer, I even made like an Excel sheet. Like one of my live streams was making an Excel sheet of trying to balance like the book and make it's crazy. But guys, let's get straight into like the tie. There's a bit of historical history between the two sides, because let me share my screen here. Who scored have the head-to-head of the last two time these two have played. I don't know if you guys can see or zoom in. So Inter at home have a good record. Last time in 2005, they beat Porto 2-1 in the group stage. And then Porto beat them home 2-0 first. But I think Inter in that year progressed at top of the group anyway. And then before that, there was a knockout game where this is the Adriano one, where Adriano scored a hat-trick at the San Siro. That was one of the iconic Adriano games when he was still, in his peak. So yeah, good memories for Inter at home against Porto. So obviously hoping to replicate those. What's the feeling in terms of do you know how Porto fans are feeling about this? How do you guys feel going into this game? I know Porto are like unbeaten since October, crazy record coming into this game. It's not conceding many goals. Like, yeah, give me the vibes coming from the Porto sides into this game.
Well, very similar to Inter. This is a huge game, and I think for Porto this season, in Portugal, you very much have three big clubs: Benfica, Porto, Sporting, and for those three clubs, the difference between them and the rest of the league is so big that anything other than winning the league is kind of underwhelming, really, for the fans. And Porto are in a situation this season where they suffered from a slow start. As you say, they've really solidified, but they had a slow start to the season. And so they're 5 points off the top of the table at the moment, which might not seem like a lot, but in Portugal, when these big clubs are only really dropping points to each other, that's quite a big lead. So for Porto fans, I think there's a similar feeling to what you were describing earlier, how maybe the title's kind of out of their hands, shall we say. They haven't given up hope of winning it, but it's very much out of their hands. So the Champions League is seen as an opportunity to for the fans to have something to really cheer about. And I think there will be a lot of optimism. Porto have got a great recent history in the Champions League. It was a couple of seasons ago that Porto had a really great run in the Champions League. Barney will correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was the quarterfinals or the semi-finals that they got to. They took out Atletico Madrid and Juventus on the way. Those are big scalps for Porto. So yeah, they will see this as an opportunity to really get stuck into this game. They won't be intimidated by Inter. Definitely not. They'll see this as an opportunity to get another famous win that they've had recently. Obviously, make no mistake, no one's expecting an easy game. In fact, I think people would probably, if they're honest, consider Porto the underdogs in this game slightly. Right. But they're definitely bang up for this. They're craving a big win, and the fans are really excited about this game. Definitely.
I think a publication in Portugal, Ebola, they did a poll today about do you think Porto? The question was, do you think Porto will get a good result in Milan? And 54% replied saying yes. Whether that good result was a win or a draw, you can look into that. But I think I would say overall the sort of there is a self-belief from Porto in the Champions League. I think if you look at CONCEICAO as well, I think he's played Italian teams 4 times in Europe, and I don't think he's lost once.
I was going to bring that up. They're the Italian killers. It was Juve, and then Milan last year in the group stage as well. They've got a really good record against the Italian teams recently.
Yeah, and that's really important. I'm sure we're going to talk about it more, but CONCEICAO, he's key to this. And you mentioned that as well, the sort of the unbeaten run they've been on. That unbeaten run was present. They've obviously faltered at the beginning of the season, Albert alluded to, but last season as well, they were once again getting close to breaking records for unbeaten runs. This is a team that are consistent winners under CONCEICAO, and I think that's what's done them so well in the past in Europe.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's when Inter picked out Porto in the draw, I was happy in terms of finally we had like a draw that it wasn't Liverpool, it wasn't like felt like we always get Real Madrid or Barcelona in the group stage. So it felt like finally it was a draw that's kind of like we'll take this, but at the same time it wasn't like I was happy because it's an easy team. Like we know as Inter fans, you'll ask most Inter fans, we're not confident going into this. I give it like if you give me percentages, I'll give it a 55% to Inter, 45 to Porto. So I'm not overly confident. I am scared of this CONCEICAO. I'm not going to call it. I don't say he plays terrorist ball, but he does like to hunker down, and he does give me those Simeone, like a Simeone light, BTEC Simeone vibes at times. But just really being able to get the best out of his teams. And as I said, like when I watch them, every time I tune into Porto, it has been in the Champions League. I'm not going to act like I'm a Porto expert, but in the Champions League, whenever I watch them against Milan, against Juve, they know how to get the job done. So I am scared going into this tie. 100%. I want to give a quick shout out to Emiliano, who just became a member of the channel as well. Thank you, appreciate that. The support is always appreciated on the channel. But going back to you guys, one of the questions I had for you guys, and then Mahdi here also has this question: who is the biggest goal scoring threat? Like, let's talk about this Porto team. Inter fans, we know about Inter now. We'll cover Inter a little bit afterwards, but talk to us about this Porto team. There's a lot of injury issues as well, but yeah, who's the star player? Who should Inter fans watch out for?
I think the most obvious one in the attacking positions is Mehdi Taremi, right? And he's had great success in Europe. You know, I think he got I don't know if he won the Puskas Award, but he was nominated for that bicycle kick against Chelsea. Was it last season?
We've got another Porto podcast there.
Nice. I'll shout out those guys because they did a great podcast today about this game. But on Taremi, sorry, he's a really interesting attacker. Someone who's, you know, I think proven himself at every level now. Even in the World Cup, he got a goal, didn't he? And I think he's the most obvious one to highlight in terms of his being a goal threat. But perhaps more importantly, Albert might want to expand, but I think will be his striking partner, who we're not quite sure who that's going to be with the injuries. There's a young Brazilian striker, Evan Nilsson, who had a decent finish the last season, an okay start to this season, and had an injury that's sort of seen him out for the last few months, and then he's working his way back into the team. That's been the best Porto have been when Evan Nilsson's been on form alongside Taremi, and I would say Evan Nilsson in that situation is the more dangerous one. And then last week, a couple of weeks ago, when they played Sporting, they went with young Brazilian winger Pepe who's naturally a winger, playing alongside Taremi, and so that worked quite well.
Another Pepe, not the Pepe centre back.
Yeah,
there's two.
Yeah, there's two, confusingly, but and that Pepe is a sort of a more nimble player, like a winger. I would probably compare it to Lautaro Martinez in sort of his physicality, but obviously Martinez is a better striker. But when that combination of players with Taremi and Pepe came along, it looks really exciting. You know, there was a lot more speed in the attack. And then the final name to add to this is Tony Martinez, a Spanish striker who's a sort of a typical number 9, and Taremi can be put in that sort of bracket as well. And so when they're both playing, the attack's a little bit slower, perhaps not as fluid. And so this is the big question for me. I think Taremi's going to play for sure, no question, and he's going to be a threat. But perhaps a more interesting thing to look at is who's going to play alongside him and how that will work.
Who would you say, who's the replacement for Luis Diaz? Like, did they ever replace him?
They did. They went to Braga for a replacement, and they signed a Brazilian winger called Wanderson Galeno, who has done very well this season. But unfortunately, the reason Barney's not mentioned him, because he was one of their best players, is because he is on the injury list that we've alluded to.
It's a very long injury list.
Exactly. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't think Galeno is going to be playing in this game. It will be too soon for him. But he was the real placement for Luis Diaz, and obviously big shoes to fill. And I think he started a little bit slowly. He joined in January, which is never easy. But he's really grown into the team, and he started to look very promising, especially this season. But sadly, you have to wait, I think, until the second leg to get a good look at him.
Yeah.
I think the other player who we haven't mentioned is Otavio. He's been in Brazil getting specialist treatment, but he's just come back.
I saw like an article come out like a few days ago where it said he's going all the way to Brazil to get specialist treatment. I was like, bro, it's not that deep. It's okay. Just pull out. You're gonna miss this game.
This is it, man. I think this is the sort of thing CONCEICAO will do. They will plant these seeds of doubt about players being fit, and I wouldn't be surprised if Otavio and Galeno start. You know, you never know. Same with Uribe in midfield. It's the sort of thing that might happen, and I think he'll use that to his advantage, to surprise. Because if Otavio plays, he's Porto's best player for sure.
Yeah, like a Mourinho type tactic. Just
yeah, exactly.
That's crazy. Oh yeah, one question, because I asked you guys in the pre-chat before we went live. Actually, both of these guys are actually not Porto fans. If you could just quickly explain your background.
Yeah, we're neutrals. We do, like I said at the beginning, we do a podcast about the Portuguese league, so we cover all of the teams. in the Portuguese league. We do obviously Porto, Benfica, and Sporting, and then equally we love all the little teams in the league. Again, there was Barney gave a shout out to the Porto podcast. They're in the chat. They're proper Porto fans, and they did a great episode about this game. So yeah, that's your homework after you've watched this, is to go and listen to that.
Yeah, no, these guys were recommended, but obviously friend of the channel, Adrian Rabona TV. So you guys know these guys are certified, and you can hear the knowledge that they're spitting at the moment. And yes, it is the Freddie Guarin derby.
Wow, that's a throwback. What a player!
Yeah. I mean, he's quite disrespected in the Inter fan base. I'm like one of the few Freddie Guarin fans in the Inter fan base. In general, he's seen as a Actually, let's not talk about Freddie Guarin. The chat will start flaming me. We've got a question here from Parmeshwar, who is quite a knowledgeable fan. I know he watches a lot of the leagues outside of Serie A. So he thinks, do you think the left back position will be an issue tomorrow, given that Wendell is defensively suspect and Zaidu Sanusi doesn't give him much assurances either?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great point. Left back it's funny. I think me and Barney were chatting about this on a recent podcast. Yeah, because left back, they do have issues. They have Zaidu Sanusi, who I think has kind of become a bit of a cult figure at Porto for his work rate and his endeavour and his passion more than perhaps his ability. Although he's popped up with important goals and he's scored important goals in the Champions League. So, don't write him off. And then Wendell was the player that they brought in from Leverkusen, who was, supposed to provide competition, because at one point they only had Sanusi, but he hasn't really been an upgrade. So it's interesting for Porto because they have one or two of these players in the starting 11. And I would say Wendell and Sanusi are the best example of that, where they're not quite up to the standard of the rest of the team. But like I was saying earlier, in Portugal, when you're not playing the other big two teams every week, that's a standard of play you can kind of get away with, because they're not really going to be tested in the way that they will be tested in this game. So yeah, I think Commenter makes a good point there, that left back could be an issue when playing in the Champions League. But like I said, Sanusi's performed in the Champions League before, so maybe he'll step up for the big occasion.
Who do you see playing on the right hand side for Inter, and who might be like attacking that position for Porto?
So according to the this is actually off the official Champions League website, which I didn't even know they did predict the lineup. So and that's the lineup I'll put in the scrolling text down below. So it looks like, and it has been, Matteo Darmian, who's actually become this season, he's become the starter ahead of Dumfries, who's had a bit of a weird season, because last year he came in, did quite well, and then he's kind of lost favor, and Darmian is just like that Mr. Reliable. He'll give you that 6.5 out of 10 all the time. So he's probably not the attacking threat that probably, like Dumfries would be. He's a bit more steady Eddie. And then, even Skriniar on this side as the right centre-back isn't the most attacking centre-back either. Barella does like to drift out onto that right-hand side. So maybe that's where there could be that kind of overload. Like when Barella starts to overload that right-hand side, he likes to make those crosses like a bit like KDB, just like in that half space a lot of times. So that's the right hand side probably. Yeah,
because I think that's why I think over the past few weeks, CONCEICAO has gone with Wendell over Sanusi. Sanusi's a bit more, I would said, a lot more pace to his game. Can obviously recover, whereas Wendell's that I personally think he's quite a solid player, but his best attributes perhaps is in possession going forward. He's much better at keeping the ball, making the right pass. Keeping the play going and getting a few assists as well recently. So I think that could be a nice little matchup actually if Darmian does play, seeing that battle. And then it's worth pointing out the right hand side as well, because I think the wings are going to be an interesting area on the pitch in this game. Is young Portuguese player João Mario, who came through Porto's academy.
This is not the Benfica João Mario, guys, by the
way. But this is a problem that you encounter a lot when you come to Portuguese football.
Well, it's because I just needed to point out because João Mario is actually like a big Inter flop, but he's balling out for Benfica right now.
He is balling for Benfica. But João Mario, the Porto right back, who he's been really good since the turn of the year. He's been he's one of these young players that came through in the past couple of years under CONCEICAO, hasn't quite got hit the level we were expecting him to yet, but in the last few months, he's starting to show that ability, and he's a real attacking threat from that right back position. You know, he's got good delivery, he's got overlaps well, gets always an option on that right hand side. So that's another area of the pitch. I think that could be a nice little, an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, I guess Jean Mario is like the Jack equivalent, like a basic name, I guess. Yeah. And then up front, for Inter, it'll probably be definitely going to be Lautaro Martinez. Like, he got rested at the weekend, came on for the last 20 minutes. So that means, he's taken over the captaincy as well over the last couple of months as well. So he's definitely going to be starting. The argument or the doubts is between Dzeko and Lukaku up front. It looks like, at the moment, Lukaku's favorite to start over Dzeko, because Dzeko's kind of been one of our best players this season, but then he's like, obviously he's 36, and you can see he's starting to drop a little bit last couple of games, whereas Lukaku's been injured the whole season, and he's slowly coming back into form, and we paid a lot of money for his loan, so he needs to pay us back. So I think, and I personally would prefer Lukaku over Dzeko, even though Dzeko has scored the important goals in the Champions League over the last 2 years, but that's who I would go for in terms of matchup. And especially knowing that it's Pepe and potentially Marcano playing at the back, that's the predicted lineup. So 2 tough physical defenders. I would like to see someone like Lukaku who can stretch them in behind a little bit more. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, the predicted lineup that it just showed for Porto was, I believe, the exact lineup they played with at the weekend. So it looks quite likely Marcano and Pep the Portuguese matches, Pepe, have a combined age of, I think, 78 or 77 or something ridiculous. So 2 veterans. I suppose if you're being positive, you could say 2 experienced players, but pace will be something that they will struggle with. The one thing I'll say though is do not underestimate Pepe at centre back, because this guy might be pushing 40, but he's arguably still
at the World Cup, didn't we? Like, this guy's still going
incredible.
Strong.
Yeah, incredible. So he's been really good, and Marcano has been solid domestically. He's been solid in the league, but him coming up against Lautaro Martinez's pace, or maybe Lukaku's physicality. If I'm being honest, that's probably where I would try and apply the pressure to get the better of the defense. To be honest,
I would say I think that Pepe and Marcano would love to play against Lukaku. I think that's the sort of player they like. They know exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be a physical battle, and I think they'll hold their own as best they can against him. Whereas someone like Dzeko, or Lautaro Martinez, that bit more, there's a bit more to think about when playing against those 2. Where they're going to be, where they're going to be popping up, and I think I can't wait to see it, and I think it's going to be a great little battle if Lukaku does play. But I think that's in Porto's favour, because I think Pepe and Marcano would relish that battle.
Yeah, now that you say that, you're right. Like, Pepe's going to relish that battle with Lukaku, whereas Dzeko he's a floater. Even though you think he's just a big lanky striker that just stands up there, he's actually like he thinks like he's a 10 or something. Like, he just loves to go all over the place, and that might be actually a better. Just to drag Marcano or Pepe out of their position, that might actually work a little bit better, rather than Lukaku, who's going to be a big lump and just kind of back into players and once in a while running behind. But he's still not the Lukaku that we remember. And I don't know if he ever will be the Lukaku from 2 seasons ago under Conte. So you've put doubt in my mind now. I don't actually know who I want. It's a tricky one. And there was a good question about the goalkeeper as well, Diogo Costa, who's where is the question? I lost it. Hey, Mohammed. He's a big up and coming goalkeeper, big hype. Obviously had a bit of a shaky World Cup, but still, I think he's definitely one of the best up and coming goalkeepers in European football. What do you guys think?
100%. I mean, he's in my opinion, he will be Porto's next big export in terms of big money sales. He's fantastic. He's a brilliant goalkeeper. He's already, in my opinion, one of Europe's best. It's interesting that the perspective of him from the World Cup was that he was a bit shaky. I mean, if you watch this guy every week, that he pulls off amazing saves. He's got everything: physicality, reads the game well, good distribution, great shot stopper. He's a gem. Yeah, he's a real gem, and it's for a team like Porto to have a player of that caliber in goal is fantastic, because good goalkeepers don't grow on trees. They often, you have to pay a lot of money to get them, or in this case, you have to hope that a gem comes through your academy, and that's what they've got at the moment. So yeah, he's a real asset to them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. Like, who is the next 50+ million player that Porto are gonna flip and sell? I guess you've answered that. Is there any others that you can see as being like the next big sale out of this Porto team?
Well, I think that's the interesting state that Porto are in right now. They had a big sales in the summer in Fabio Vieira and Vitinha to PSG, and there hasn't really been that many youngsters coming through since then. I've mentioned Evan Nilsson, the Brazilian striker, who's had a bit of an injury hit season and hasn't quite hit the heights yet, but he's looking promising. João Mario as well, the right back. But I think the state that Porto are in at the moment, and this is sort of going back to CONCEICAO again and the job he's done. They haven't been able to invest as much as they usually have, and the players they brought in, like Grujic, who they signed from Liverpool a few seasons ago, Canadian midfielder Eustáquio, who they signed from Passos de Ferreira in Portugal. These players aren't necessarily going to be these £50 million departures. Mehdi Taremi as well. He's at 30 years old. They're not going to make tons of money on him, but in that sense, CONCEICAO is able to build this team and get a close knit group of lads who are just going to do exactly the game plan he's going to want executed. And I think that's going to be their strength. But that's when the questions of the quality that they're facing the Champions League is going to come up. That's what's going to be interesting. And I think that midfield battle is a really interesting one with Inter. Yeah,
I mean the Who Scored puts it like on paper they put it as like a 4-3-1-2 or a 4-4-2 diamond, but from what I've seen at the few matches I watched, it's usually a pretty flat 4-4-2, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, that the lineup that you see there probably reflects the players that are out injured, because the two that we've mentioned a couple of times, Otavio and Galeno, Porto played their best football this season with those two on either wing playing a 4-4-2, and what viewers might not be familiar with Porto's squad, but the players that you see in that lineup, there's only one really that you would call an out-and-out winner, and that's him, Pepe Aquino. So I think they've had to perhaps adapt to make it a bit narrower, which is interesting. I wonder whether that would be the reality on the pitch, or whether
Who Scored are not very reliable with their predicted lineup.
Yeah, perhaps CONCEICAO would ask Andre Franco to do a job on the wing, and they would stick to the formation. But yeah, they are lacking their top wingers at the moment, sadly.
Yeah, no, his CONCEICAO's football does rely a lot on the wingers, doesn't it? On the creating those 1v1 situations out wide. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how he works. And I've also seen him, like, I guess Juve, I remember seeing, he wasn't afraid to, it was like a 5 at the back, or like even like a 6 at the back at times. But I guess they had to defend the lead, and I think they were one man down because Taremi got sent off that game.
Handball,
yeah. So interesting. But yeah, speaking of CONCEICAO, that's one of the topics I wanted to cover today. There's a beautiful picture here,
wow.
Inzaghi, a bit of vintage there. Excuse the blurriness. Inzaghi and CONCEICAO, obviously they were teammates back in the Lazio days, and then CONCEICAO even joined Inter later on in his career, so he has that big link to Inter. And I was telling the guys in the backstage before we came on, and the viewers of this channel will know, this guy is my he is the Don. He is my pick for post Inzaghi. I think he's realistic in terms of affordability, wages, and I think, as you guys have alluded to, in terms of what Porto have done over the last few years, they've sold big players like Luis Diaz, Vieira, and Fabio Vieira, and players like that. Haven't really replaced or invested into the team, and I've read rumors that he's also been frustrated about the situations at Porto. So I see that, I see that as a potential move coming in the coming years. What do you guys think? Do you think I'm being a delusional Inter fan, or is that something that's a possibility?
I mean, yeah, I think it's there's something about Conceição in Italy, isn't there, that just sort of fits perfectly. I don't particularly knew much about his playing career before like doing this podcast, but you know, it just there's something there, isn't there? I mean, what I would say with Conceição though is that it's the Champions League performances in the last few seasons that I felt has put his name on the map. I mean, but I would look at his domestic form and what he's done there, and as you said there, the work he's done with the Porto squad he's been given the last 2 seasons, and he's had to develop, he's had to evolve, and he's done that and brought out the best of young players when needed, and also bring out the best of sort of not top tier players, but got them playing above their station. So yeah, I think it does make sense for him to make that step up. But what I would say is that I feel like he's also not an impatient man, and he does have a lot of love for Porto, and he's obviously a very young manager. He won't feel rushed into making any decisions. You know, I think that those opportunities will come years down the line. They're not just going to come once in a blue moon. Like, he's always going to have that option. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I don't want him to go yet though. He's too much fun, man.
Yeah, he looks like a character to have, like, you know, just that charisma. His press conferences, like I saw the one that he did after they lost to Benfica in October, and he was just like, yeah, like, we're gonna fight, we're gonna win this title, basically, he was saying, even though everything is stacked against him. Like, he's the opposite to Inzaghi. Like, Inzaghi's just the, you know, he says what he needs to say, but he doesn't like ever overstep, or like he's a corporate guy. Like, whereas Conceição just seems like a guy that will rub people up the wrong way and kind of use any little, as you guys said, like even like tactics in the media to like say, oh, this guy's injured and this kind of stuff. Like, I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he's a maverick. He's a really entertaining manager, but he's, you know, also a manager who's earned his reputation through results. It's funny you say, like, maybe he gets a bit frustrated at Porto sometimes. He's almost like, if you've ever had a mate who's in a relationship with his girlfriend and they're always arguing and he's like always moaning about her, but then you just know, like, you know, nothing, that he's always going to get back together.
Right.
That's like Conceição and Porto. He's a very, very loyal manager, very loyal, and you can tell he loves Porto. He loves the club, and he loves being there. So he's not in a rush to leave, although I think in his career he will definitely be open to it. He's never managed a bigger club than Porto, so anything would be a step up. And I think Italy would be, like you say, a logical next place to go. There's the comparison with Simeone, I think, is it's said a lot, but I think it's probably quite apt. You know, he's not necessarily a man. He's not like a Pep figure where he's like known for his tactical innovation or that side of the game. He's known for being a manager who gets the best out of his players. He's an incredibly demanding manager, incredibly demanding. His standards are so high. And I'm not just talking about demanding in terms of demanding that the players play better than they can, but he just demands complete dedication. He demands that his players always commit to the game, commit to the club, commit to his tactics. He can be emotional, he can be fiery, but I think, like you say, who doesn't like that in a manager, to show passion and to show fight? And I think like Barney said, I would like him to stay, and I'm sure any Porto fans watching him, of course, want him to stay. But it would also be interesting when he does, you know, make that next step, to see if it is to a bigger club, not a bigger club, but, you know, on like a bigger stage where there's more eyes on him all the time. It'll be interesting to see how he's received and what his reputation is. But I think you can tell from what me and Barney have said that he's a manager that we both rate very highly. So we'll be intrigued to follow him if he does go somewhere.
Yeah, and another excuse to just bring up.
We have a little illustration of that picture on our podcast logo. It's like a really iconic image.
It is that celebration as well, and he's just like, it's great, because it's funny, because when he was a player, I mean, he was before my time, because I was still like young when he was at Inter, but I remember like when he was a player, he wasn't known to be the most like professional or the most like. I mean, even when he was Inter, he was like, if you see pictures of him, he looks a bit chubby, like he looks a bit out of shape as well, which is funny now that he's become this kind of almost like a dictator, you know, very sergeant type manager. It's funny how things change when you retire or you mature. So it's funny how he's changed completely. But one question I had for you guys, because Indra here says he wouldn't be good if Inter, because again, going back to how you guys mentioned earlier about Inter's financial state, a lot of things, not just for Inter, to be fair, in Italy are pointing towards like Italian clubs basically like need to do basically what the Portuguese clubs have been doing, and getting young players from South America or wherever, scouting and then selling them on, because otherwise you're not going to be able to survive. So Inter, not maybe going to a youth project, but they're going to have to start spending money more on youth rather than expensive, high wage older players. But to me, like CONCEICAO is that guy, isn't it? Like he's brought through a lot of young players.
Well, last season is a good example, but for the youth players he brought through in Vitinha, Fabio Vieira, and João Mario to some extent as well, but that was a mixture of him sort of being forced to, in terms of what was at his disposal in terms of the talent, and in some cases, particularly Fabio Vieira, he still didn't get that much game time. It was a very slow process, and they were able to sell them on because of their natural ability. I think it's actually, he's a very loyal manager and demands, as I was alluded to, he demands a lot from his players, and so if that young player isn't going to give it to him, he's not faced to drop him or not let him in the team at all. So I think that's the sort of struggle me and Albert had with last season, and they won the league, and those young players excelled, but it was that understanding of his treatment of those players and the opportunities he gave them, and some of the decisions he made, like why they were dropped after putting in an amazing performance. So he's a complicated manager like that. It's all about form. It's all about his feeling about the player that will get them in the team. But
There's
then
that old school Italian manager thing about him as well. Then
yeah. But then you cannot deny the sort of the leaps and bounds Vitinha and Fabio Vieira came on last season. It was remarkable, and that was all under his management.
Yeah, what do you think, Albert?
Yeah, exactly that. And I think Barney was alluding to the case of a player who's quite notorious in Portugal this season, of David Carmo, who was Porto signed him from Braga. He was a young centre-back. Sorry, he is a young centre-back who was linked at one point to Liverpool. So he was highly rated. Porto made him the most expensive domestic Portuguese transfer ever when Porto paid 20 million euros to Braga for him. Might not sound like a lot of money, but in Portuguese club terms, that's a huge transfer fee. But he's barely played because it's not quite worked out. He's not hit form, and CONCEICAO is not the type of manager to say, well, my owners spent a lot of money on this player, so I have to play him. If he doesn't feel like he can rely on the player, then he won't put him in. But then, the flip side of that is when a young player earns his trust, that player will be rewarded, and that's what you saw with Vitinha, who was made a really key player for Porto last year, like vital to their success, and with Fabio Vieira. So, when it comes to developing youth players, he's not someone who's just going to stick under 21 players in there for fun, but he will be very good at finding the right players and managing them well, perhaps over a longer period of time. And of course, the other thing I would say is that if Inter are changing their kind of strategy to maybe, as a lot of clubs are around Europe, not making big money transfers. If you're after a manager who can get the best out of players on a budget, that's what CONCEICAO's done at Porto every season has been there.
Yeah, no, I think there's also like a thing in a lot of the Inter fan base is frustrated because we don't really just. I mean, Di Marco's one who's kind of made it now, but even he's like 24 now, so I wouldn't count him as a young player anymore. It's just like, is that struggle of like, why doesn't an Inter youth player ever make it, or kind of like, why don't we bring through? So there's always that frustration where I think it all boils over to young players should play just because they're young players, but at the same time, are they good enough? And there's not that many that I'd regret letting go. I mean, Zaniolo was a good example, but even he, like, I'm not even sure if I regret letting Zaniolo go. We've seen what's happened to him over the last couple of weeks since he's gone to Turkey. But anyway, I digress there. One thing we haven't got, and thank you, Eduardo, for reminding us, moving away from the CONCEICAO talk, which you guys have just convinced me even more, by the way, that I want CONCEICAO at my club, and one more time to get the picture. What are Porto's weaknesses? I mean, obviously, we know the injury issues are a big problem right now, but even without the injury issues, what are the weaknesses in this Porto team?
Yeah, I think I would look at the midfield and perhaps the biggest injury to them, if not Otavio, would be Uribe, who usually plays a sort of defensive midfield role, who's always called doubtful for the Wednesday's game. I think his loss, suddenly you're looking at Eustáquio, Grujic, young Portuguese player Andre Franco has been getting a few games recently, though he's more of an attacking midfielder, and it will be that sort of combination of players that CONCEICAO is able to play with, and that is, I mean, you look at Grujic, you look at Eustáquio, they're going to be very organised. They're going to be, they're going to do their jobs well defensively. They're going to work and work. But it's, what they're able to do once they're on the ball and sort of creating the chances. We saw, I think, a good performance to sort of look to is that their win against Sporting a couple of weeks ago, where Sporting had their moments. They put them on the back foot occasionally, but I think Porto were really patient, and it's to the credit of those midfielders that they were able to sort of weather the storm, and then able to take their chances with the attacking options. So I would certainly look at midfield as perhaps where they might lose this game, just because they need to, they need to be they need to be organised and really sort of put the work in. I think because they're not gonna. I don't see them having that much of the ball as they would necessarily like.
Yeah. What do you think, Al? Well, where can they exploit this Porto team?
I think we've touched on a few of them in this show. I think left fullback was one we talked about. Wendell's not the best player, although he had a decent rating, obviously, in their last game. But playing well against Rio Ave's a very different thing. The aging centre-back partnership, while it's got a lot of experience, lacks in certain things like pace. And I think, Barney touched on, in my opinion, the most important one, the centre of midfield with Uribe gone. Grujic hasn't convinced me as much as Uribe did. And then there's the slight caveat that I think Taremi's not in the best form. He's not scored loads of goals recently, but never write him off because he's always got a great finish in him. And it would be just like him to go a few games in the league without scoring and then pop up in the a big Champions League game with a great goal on the biggest stage. He seems to love a big occasion. So don't write him off.
The guy that is a big game player. Ooh, am I still here, guys? Sorry, my internet might have...
You're back. A very brief intermission.
All right. Yeah, sorry. Sometimes I think when it's like peak hours here in the UK, like around 9 o'clock, it starts to play up a bit. Yeah, you guys know the struggle. But yeah, no, thank you. That's that's giving me a good insight. So yeah, that left hand side, that's my main takeaway. Is Matteo Darmian, the Barella, all those guys on that right hand side. Like let's target that right hand side for sure. And what about off the bench? Is there any like new up and coming or young players that like he's been putting on that kind of can change the game for Porto? Or is it just the starting 11 is really like, and then after that it's just kind of youth players that we shouldn't be too worried about?
Well, I think there's another Brazilian winger called Gabriel Veron, who's sort of like a traditional winger in that sense. He's got good pace, good on the ball. Although hasn't been able to do that much this season, but would certainly inject a bit of pace if that midfield combination isn't sort of offering that sort of intensity on the wings. I mentioned him as well earlier. The striking options, Tony Martinez is sort of a classic number 9. I really rate him. I think he's a sort of striker you might put on, get an opportunity, and you're pretty confident he'll finish it. So he'll be the one who, if they're looking to start launching it forward and try and get him on the end of things, that would be the other option they've got.
Yeah, those FIFA names, Wendell. Funny, like Wendell back in FIFA, I remember used to be one of those like really high potential players that he used to buy, and they go up to like 90 rated. I guess it hasn't quite worked out for him after that. But that's it's pretty, I think, a pretty comprehensive preview into this Porto team, to be honest. One question that I saved from one of the viewers, guys, was let me find a Niak. Just in terms of, you guys obviously cover the whole league. Where do you place the Portuguese league, the Primeira League at the moment, like, you know, it's obviously has its ups and downs, and it has like these teams like Benfica and Porto that always make it in the further stages. But yeah, like, you know, Braga the other day losing to Fiorentina, who are like almost getting into the relegation zone. Like, where do you rank it? Do you think it's a top 5 league, or do you think, because it has it dropped out of the top 5, I think now, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
Portuguese league.
Dropped out, and then Portugal took over. I can't remember.
Portugal was the 5th best league for about 2 weeks, and then it went back down to 6th. But no, it's a great question, and just to try and answer it succinctly, the first thing I'll say is that the Braga Fiorentina result was a bit of a freak result, so don't take that too much on face value. Braga, really strange. They've had a great season, looks really good, and then every now and again have a terrible result. They lost 5-0 to Sporting. I think they've lost 5-0 to Sporting twice this season or something ridiculous.
Whoa.
And then they had that 4-0 against Fiorentina, which was completely, honestly, I'm not just saying this to big up like the Portuguese league, but that was a freak result. It was they had a bit of a meltdown that game. That's not really representative of how good they are. But yeah, to answer the question, you know, Portuguese league's in a really interesting place because it's obviously not it's not one of the top 5 leagues. If we're being totally honest, it has aspirations to battle France for that 5th spot. And I think the top teams in Portugal, Porto, Benfica and Sporting, can do really well in European competition. And that, of course, gets you coefficient points, and that gets you up that league ranking table, if you like. But yeah, it has its issues with money mainly. There's not a lot of money in the league outside the big teams. But there's also, you know, the reason we do the podcast, man, is there's so much to love. There's so many great teams with great stories. You know, the thing you get in Portugal is you get great young players that kind of come out of nowhere. These clubs have scouting networks, not just in South America, but all over the place. You know, we've had an influx of players from Japan. You know, there's scouting happening in Africa. So yeah, you get to discover so many great players. There's great drama. There's the perfect amount of like chaos as well, like with disorganization, just a little bit. You know, if you sprinkle a little bit of disorganization,
corruption here and there,
yeah, just a tiny bit, kind of makes it a bit more exciting. But no, ultimately, it's like it's a league that prides itself on quality players, whether they have to scout them from kind of more niche places. Great managers as well. Loads of young managers come from Portugal, and you kind of see them first in the Primeira Liga. So yeah, just I'm trying to avoid giving you too much of like a sales pitch for the league, but yeah, obviously we love this league, and there's a lot to love about it.
Yeah. Look, speaking about the young managers thing, where do you rank Amorim? Would you say how would you rank him in terms of him, Schmidt, Conceição? Like, how would you rank like the top managers in the Primeira Liga?
I think him and he's going through a bit of an identity crisis at the moment. He's had he arrived at Sporting, did an amazing first season there. Obviously, they won the league after X amount of years. Sorry, I can't remember, but he's got a 5
release clause, by the way. Isn't it like something ridiculous?
Yeah, it was. Is it like 40 million euros?
Yeah, I think it's 30 or 40 for a manager, so it's big.
Jeez.
Yeah, but you know, he came to the league with this 5-2-3 formation, which he hasn't shifted from, and the current crop of players he's got, having promoted some young players in the past seasons, and we've seen them go on to big clubs as well. He was very good at that, but I think clubs have found him out now for his tactics. You know, he hasn't changed at all. So I think he's at the moment in time he's going through a bit of a working out what's the best thing to do and to try and turn things around at Sporting. But from what we saw the first few seasons, and you know the way he develops the players like Paulinho now at Fulham, Mateus Nunes at Wolves, you know, Nuno Mendes, he sold to PSG within 1 season of working with Amorim. You know, that shows you what he can do with in terms of development of young players. I think just tactically is where we're sort of trying to find him out now and work out where he is, because, like I said, great first season, but as it's progressed, things have got a bit stale, a bit stagnant. So it will be interesting. But I think he's destined for a big job at some point. He's shown enough.
Yeah, and I guess that will be. I think only Premier League clubs will be able to pay that kind of release clause. That answers Nadim's question, I think, because if it's going to happen, it's going to be one of those. Probably Chelsea, knowing Chelsea these days.
He'll be managing Chelsea in the Champions League in like 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Release clause paid. Bam.
Yeah.
The second leg against Dortmund will be managed by Amorim.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's an interesting coach for sure. I think he's one of those that like I think he's because he dresses well and he's like quite young. He's got that like hipster. A lot of the hipsters like Amorim, but I prefer CONCEICAO. CONCEICAO, man. one more excuse to bring up. Yeah, but
I don't even notice, mate. There was a story that came out recently where CONCEICAO likes to chill out by going down to the river in Porto, in the town centre, and just going down some steps and playing. Is it chess with just some old guys from town? And like that's how he spends his spare time. It was just great to see.
Yeah.
Wow, so he's a thinking man. Chess is a thinking man's game.
I think it might have been checkers actually. Just
I think it was checkers.
Not to bring him down, but
right, it takes him a little bit down. But no, that's funny. That's funny. I definitely didn't have him as a chess guy. The checkers makes more sense. But to finish up, let me just finish up because people are asking. Like, obviously, we got to cover Inter a little bit. I think we talked a lot about Porto and the Portuguese league. So if we look at, we're just using the who scored as a thingy. So actually, pretty much the who scored lineup is actually quite accurate. I think Dumfries or Darmian for Dumfries is going to be the only change for Inter. Or actually, no. It's going to be difficult. Brozovic, he's come back from injury, but Hakan Çalhanoğlu has just been amazing in the CDM role. So I doubt it's going to be like this. If we look at the lineup here, actually they have it like that as well. So they have this is supposed to be our trio, by the way, guys. Like Barella, Brozovic, Hakan in theory. But since Brozovic got injured, Hakan's took that role as the regista so well, and then Mkhitaryan's coming as the left centre mid. So I think if Mkhitaryan wasn't in, he got a little injury at the weekend. If he isn't injured, I think he's going to stick with the Barella Hakan midfield. I don't know what guys in the comments section thing, and I don't know. Do you guys have any opinion on that midfield, Barney or Al?
I think I'm not too familiar with Inter's squad, but a few of those names are scaring me a little bit. I mean, I remember Çalhanoğlu as a really great player and Barella as a really great player. So there's definitely some big names in that team that make me a little bit nervous, I will say.
I think certainly there's looking at those players and their technical ability. That's what always worries me. I think Porto's midfield will be able to get close to them, but then that might not be an issue for them. They might be able to turn them and get passes away, and that's why I feel like it's going to be really interesting to see how that pans out. Yeah.
It seems like the chat is also edging towards the Mkhitaryan. I think it's just a tried and tested this season. In the big games this year, Barcelona, that was our midfield. Napoli win, that was our midfield. It's just been the tried and tested midfield this season, which is also why there are the rumors that Inter are going to sell Brozovic in the summer because it's. He's 30, 31. He's the highest paid player. So I think it's just getting to that stage where it might be best to monetize on him and not do what happened. Get the money that we can, not do what we did with Skriniar and end up losing him on a free transfer.
What do you think about Inter's back line in terms of dealing with a player like Taremi?
I think when it comes to like a physical striker like Taremi, I think we're going to do quite well. Skriniar, Acerbi, both of them do quite well when they have when they have a target. I think when they struggle is if you guys are playing or if Porto were playing like false nine with like no reference point and they would have to move around all over the place. I think that's where they would struggle. But I think with Taremi, they have a guy that they know, like one of them is going to have to focus and like stay on tight to him. So I think they're going to do quite well with him. And Acerbi's been a real revelation this season. He was a last minute buy and he's 34 years old, but he's been honestly probably actually the most consistent defender we have at the back this year, surprisingly so. So I think I'm pretty confident dealing with the Taremi defensively at home anyway. I think second leg we'll see how we do at the Dragao. But I think at home, I think we take this game, and I'm pretty confident. And that leads me on to the finishing with the match predictions, guys. Yeah, I'm as much as I fear Porto, as much as I respect CONCEICAO as well. Inter have been convincing me in big games recently and in the Champions League in general under Inzaghi. I think last year, I mean, we were close to going through even against Liverpool. It's 2-1 on aggregate until Alexis Sanchez got sent off. So I think Inter can get a 2-1 victory here. That's my prediction. What do you guys think?
I'll go first. I think I know I've spotted a few names popping up in the chat, people that follow us. So I hope I don't upset too many Porto fans by saying this, but I think it's more likely that Inter will win this game, if I put it that way. And I say that because of the injury list, which I think is quite significant. You're talking about 2 or 3 of Porto's best players who have been injured. So that is a real disappointment. So from my perspective, if I was Porto, I'd be looking at this game thinking we've got 2 legs. Even at the very worst, if they could come out of this, even if it was a 1-0 loss, I wouldn't hate that, because then I would think by the time we come to the second leg in 3 weeks' time, we're going to have players back. We're going to be in our own stadium.
That's
and
true.
I would
the second leg is in 3 weeks.
Yeah,
isn't it? Long time.
Exactly. So I think that's what I would be thinking. I would be just thinking about trying to grind out this result. It's not going to be pretty. I would absolutely snap your hand off for a draw right now. I would take that right now, honestly, because I think that second leg was when they would say, right, we've got 90 minutes to win this game. And even, like I said, even if it was a 1-0 loss, then I think they can take it to extra time penalties at the Dragao. So my prediction, I will go for 1-0 to Inter, because I think you guys are in a stronger position at the moment, but I think Porto will be resilient, as they always are. And then, I'll reserve my second leg prediction for when we see who's back from injury.
I think I'm going to agree with Albert with a lot of what you said there. I think 1-0 is what I think might happen. The key for me would be if Otavio plays. I think for me it's as simple as if Otavio and Uribe get back in the team miraculously, then I think Porto would think they've got a chance of nicking something in Milan. I think that's what they would potentially do. But without those players, I think it's very much going to be about containing and just trying to come away with as few goals against as possible. So yeah, I think I'd agree with Albert on 1-0.
Yeah, definitely. I think we need to secure the win here, because as everyone's saying in the comments, Inter have been awful away from home this year. It's we haven't kept a clean sheet all year, apart from the 0-0 draw we had against Sampdoria last week, which is embarrassing. So yeah, we need to get the result at home for sure. And yeah, obviously we talked about the Adriano hat-trick earlier, that he had the home game. So it'd be amazing if Lautaro, El Toro Martinez can step up in front of their Tony Martinez. But by the way, is he any good, that Tony Martinez guy? I only discovered him the other day.
I like him.
Arnie likes him. He's decent. He's decent. He's a bit more mobile than you'd think for a kind of tall striker. He's decent, and he's a good finisher. He's not world class, but he's decent.
Yeah. I was just going through the team. I was like, what the hell is this Tony Martinez guy? Yeah. No, it's I think it looks like most of the chat is pretty confident for an Inter win, which usually means we'll lose. But no, I'm feeling, as you said, it's really on Inter. With all your injuries, Inter have to win this. If it was a full strength Porto, then you could say it's the same as when we played Milan recently. They had Mañana out, they had Tomori out. When you're missing all these important players, there is no excuse for you not to win. So yeah, Inter definitely, the pressure is on Inter to definitely win this game, and hopefully we get something from Lukaku, man. We need something from Lukaku, like a sign of life. That would be great if he starts, because Inter fans are getting on his back now. It's getting late on in the season.
But all these stories, man, I'll just say that will Porto, that's fuel to Porto. They'll ride on that pressure of you needing to get the result. They'll ride on that pressure Lukaku's under. They'll use that to their advantage in any way they can. That's how they'll sort of make the game happen, is through frustrating and just picking on all these little things that they can. Pepe's going to be winding up Lukaku. Maybe we'll have a Lukaku red card, whatever. But all these sort of things are what.
Oh man, I wouldn't even be surprised. that guy is like, he's trying so hard. He tries even like maybe too hard. But I wouldn't be even surprised. But yeah, hopefully everyone keeps the. Yeah, that's one thing though. The CONCEICAO teams also do is kind of put that pressure to get in your face as well, don't they?
Yeah. Mm.
So yeah, they
Yeah.
need to keep a nice cool head, and not,
Mm.
yeah, like Barella the other year got sent off against Real Madrid. If you guys saw that one, so yeah, there's still some growing to do for some of these guys. But yeah, guys, that's the preview for me. We're hitting the hour mark, so thank you very much to both Albert and Barney, Long Ball Futebol podcast. So make sure you guys check them out. And yeah, guys, any closing remarks from both of you?
I just say thank you very much again for inviting us. You know, like Barney said, we love chatting about Portuguese football. We love chatting about the Champions League. Give us a shameless plug if you want to check out the podcast. It's the Long Ball Futebol podcast, and yeah, as we described, it's about the domestic Portuguese league. So it's a bit different to the Italian league. There's slightly less money in it, but there's so many great teams, great players, great drama, great managers, and yeah, if you want to be the guy who knows about all those good young players before they end up at Chelsea for 85 million, if you want to be able to like tell your mates, oh yeah, I saw that guy playing Portugal, then yeah, check out the podcast.
Yeah, I'll just say thank you as well, because opportunities like this from people like you really mean the world to us. So yeah, thanks for giving us this platform to come and chat to you.
No, definitely. Thank you guys for coming on. Yeah, definitely. I'm not saying it just because they came on the pod. Like I listened to their pod last week when I found them, and yeah, it's definitely worth a listen to, because yeah, you get all these little nuggets that you yeah, I'm not a regular Premier League watcher, so you find out more and more about other leagues. And yeah, as the anti-Premier League like sentiment is growing within like the football fan base. So yeah, we gotta support all the other non-Premier League leagues out there for sure.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so check them out on Twitter, and all the podcast platforms have left their links in the description, so you should be able to get onto their link tree. I think I left the link tree link down below. And yeah, appreciate everyone that came through the live stream. If you're watching this afterwards, please make sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on Wednesday for a post-match reaction. Hopefully positive. Hopefully my 2-1 prediction comes true. Ciao ragazzi, forza Inter.